Venezuelan state security forces announced the capture of 2 citizens implicated in the destabilization plot deemed Operation Red October. The indefinite national strike action by Peruvian doctors protesting working conditions and low pay has entered its 14th day. And protests by Indian farmers and clashes with police resulting in the death of at least one demonstrator overshadowed the Republic Day military parade. Hello and welcome again to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is From the South. Venezuelan state security forces announced the capture of 2 citizens allegedly involved in the Red October operation promoted by the far right to destabilize the country. The announcement was made by lawmaker for the Great Patriotic Pole Alliance, Freddy Bernal, who explained that the civilians, Juan Carlos Roa, alias Porques, and Carely Silva, alias La Negra, were detained by agents of the Directorate General of the Military Counterintelligence. Bernal detailed that the conspiracy was led by former opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido and coordinated by the U.S. citizen Ben Smith Benson, alias Luis Alberto Medina Guzman. The legislator stressed that this plan, including destabilization acts in the states of Apure, Táchira, and the area south of Lake Maracaibo, in order to weaken the response capacity of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces in the case of a foreign armed aggression against the territory.
This operation, called Red October, was coordinated by a man who was born in Colombia and is now a citizen of the United States and belongs to the intelligence services of the United States. He had several targets among the so-called crescent made up by the state of Apure, Táchira, and the area south of Lake Maracaibo, where they intended to sabotage the antennas of the General Secretariat of the Defense Council of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, to avoid or to minimize or hinder any reaction from the armed forces at the time of a paramilitary incursion or even a formal incursion.
The Permanent People's Tribunal began its 48th session to address political genocide, impunity, and crimes against peace in Colombia and judge its state. The International Tribunal focused its debate on condemning the impunity that prevails in the country in the face of the wave of violence in various regions of the nation. The bloc warned that the systematic murders against social leaders and peace signatories worsens the violation of human rights in the South American country. In this sense, lawyers participating in the activity denounced the plot of the Colombian state with business elite and the media to attack human rights to the country.
The far right, the armed forces, business sector and some media united with the sole purpose of crushing the peace accord without caring about the cost that such a decision entailed for a country like Colombia, especially in terms of human life and violation of human rights.
And also in Colombia, President Ivan Duque announced the death of his defense Minister Carlos Holmes Trujillo after health complications while battling COVID-19.
Con profundo dolor y tristeza,
It is with deep pain and sadness that I have received the news of the death of our defense minister, Carlos Holmes Trujillo. Carlos Holmes Trujillo died early this morning after complications in his health while battling COVID-19.
que la partida de este gran
May the
colombiano
departure of this great Colombian surface to honor all those who have died in this global tragedy, that serve to understand that facing this situation requires that there is no room for pettiness, opportunism, vanity, or politicking, that facing this situation means consolidating the best version of ourselves.
According to the latest polls in Ecuador, the presidential candidate for Union for Hope coalition, Andrés Arauz, is leading voting intention ahead of the elections to be held on February the 7th. The latest survey by the pollster Clima Social determined that 30.1% of respondents intend to vote for Arauz, has 17.2% support. As election day approaches, Andrés Arauz has urged the National Electoral Council to guarantee the participation of Ecuadorians residing abroad who have complained of a lack of information required to cast their ballots. President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, is making his first official visit to Chile in the midst of the health crisis sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic. President Fernandez arrived in Santiago de Chile this Tuesday on a visit aimed at strengthening bilateral cooperation between the two neighbors. The Chilean government honored the Argentinian president upon his arrival. The announcement of agreements on economic, environmental, commercial, and health cooperation are expected. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera described the visit as fruitful for the economic recovery in the post-pandemic period.
This visit reflects the desire and commitment of both governments and both countries to continue strengthening ties of friendship and collaboration. The pandemic has subjected us to what it has subjected us to face in our own way, each of us, the unknown, and sometimes I think that if we had been more together and more united, we could surely have handled things better.
In Peru, the indefinite national strike action by doctors has reached its 14th day. The doctors are protesting against the poor working conditions in the midst of the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. This Tuesday, the Peruvian Medical Federation held a protest in front of the Ministry of Economic headquarters, demanding a response to the proposal made by the union. Among the demands issued by health professionals is for the bill related to the third phase of the salary scales to be passed, which was presented by the Federation on January 18th to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Economy. Meanwhile, in view of the health crisis and the deficiencies and major shortages in the health system, the Medical Association proposed the implementation of a quarantine focused on the 100 districts with the highest infection rates, as well as a return to phase 2 of the economic reopening, with the understanding that the government should prioritize health over the economy. In Nicaragua, life sentence in femicide cases went into effect on Monday. The act, approved for the first time in history, was published in the official Gazette. In this context, it is ready to be applied in cases of femicide after rape, motivated by misogyny or violence in the presence of the victim's children. Also, poisoning, asphyxiation, torturing, or vulneration of the victims are aggravating circumstances. On the other hand, it was specified that the law will be extended to murders for hate, intolerance, and discrimination. Should be noted that in Nicaragua, in the last 10 years, 716 femicides have been reported, a lower number aside to other nations in the region. Italian Premier Giuseppe Conte resigned on Tuesday after a key coalition ally pulled his party's support over Conte's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, setting the stage for consultations this week to determine if he can form a third government. Conte tendered his resignation to President Sergio Mattarella, who held off on any immediate decision other than to ask Conte to keep the government running in the near term. The president will begin consulting with leaders of political parties starting on Wednesday. Conte is hoping to get Mattarella's support to try to form a new coalition government that can steer the country as it battles the pandemic and an economic recession, and creates a spending plan for the 209 billion euros Italy is getting in the European Union recovery funds. The current coalition of the Five Star Movement, Democratic Party, and smaller Loop Party are all hoping for a third Conte government.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. The President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella, received this morning at the Quirinala Palace the Prime Minister, Professor and lawyer Giuseppe Conte, who resigned from the government. The President of the Republic reserved his decision and invited the government to remain in office for the handling of current affairs. Consultations will start tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday 27th January.
Early elections in this context today are not really a feasible option. I think the probability is close to zero. There's too much at stake for the parties in power today, too much at stake to run the risk of early elections that they could lose very easily.
A new two-party coalition government was sworn in on Tuesday in Estonia, led by the first woman prime minister since the nation's independence. The 15-member cabinet of Prime Minister Kaja Kallas took office after lawmakers in Estonia's parliament approved the government appointed by President Kersti Kaljulaid. During the appointment ceremony, Kaljulaid said the threat of the coronavirus pandemic had pressed the need for a new administration to be put in place quickly. Kallas is a lawyer and a former European Parliament member. The Center-Right Reform Party that she chairs and the left-leaning Center Party, which are Estonia's two biggest political parties, reached a deal on Sunday to form a new government. On Tuesday, several teachers, non-academic school workers, and university students demonstrated in major French cities to demand better salaries for sector workers. Schools, nurses also joined the protest. In late 2020, the Education Ministry announced a salary increase for young teachers in France from February 2021, but education sector unions are now calling for wider pay rises in the sector, already promised during pension reforms last year, which they hope will bring long-term and substantial increases for all teachers. Salaries for teachers in France are 7% below the average for early and mid-career professionals recorded around the world by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Students will also join teachers in strikes today to protest a lack of access they have had to their teachers through the health crisis. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Tuesday Russia hopes the 2015 international nuclear agreement with Iran will be upheld and implemented following talks with his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif.
We discussed extensively the situation about the joint comprehensive plan of action on settling the Iranian nuclear program, and we have the same position. We are interested in its full-fledged preservation and are convinced that the path towards it lies exclusively within the consistent and comprehensive implementation of this crucial document by all parties involved based on United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231. I want to inform you that Sputnik V vaccine has been registered and approved in Iran by our health authorities. We hope we will start a joint vaccine production with the relevant Russian and Iranian institutes.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced this Tuesday that more than 100,000 people who tested positive for the novel coronavirus have died in the UK since the pandemic took hold last year, representing the highest death toll in Europe as the country battles a new strain and its National Health Service is on the brink of collapse.
I'm sorry to have to tell you that today the number of deaths recorded from COVID in the UK has surpassed 100,000. And it's hard to compute the sorrow contained in that grim statistic. We will remember the courage of countless working people, not just our amazing NHS and care workers, but shop workers, transport staff, pharmacists, teachers, police, armed forces, emergency services, and many others who kept our country going during our biggest crisis since the Second World War.
Irish Prime Minister Michelle Martin announced that Ireland's third coronavirus lockdown will be extended until March 5th. Also, for the first time, travelers arriving to the country are to be legally required to quarantine either at home or in a hotel.
Therefore, government has decided to extend all of the current level 5 restrictions until the 5th of March, with a view to crushing the numbers of those contracting the disease.
Thousands of Indian farmers clashed with police across New Delhi on Tuesday as they took protests against agricultural reforms into the capital during a giant Republic Day military parade. Police laid on one of their biggest security operations in years in a bid to keep demonstrators away from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whose government pushed for the 3 agricultural laws that have sparked 2 months of widespread protests by farmers who stress their livelihoods and the country's food sovereignty are under threat. One farmer was killed in what police said was an accident after his tractor overturned. All over the city, security forces fired tear gas and staged baton charges. As night fell, authorities cut internet and phone links in the areas on the edge of Delhi where the farmers have set up their camps.
We are here to support our brothers, our farmers, to government, to Indians, because these laws are going to spoil the life of common men of this country.
I am here to support my brothers because they are from a very long time they are protesting for these 3 black bills. They are going to spoil every person's livelihood in future. So government need to solve the problem of them because when
More than 176,000 people have been affected by the cyclone Eloise in Mozambique, and 8,800 houses have been destroyed, damaged, or flooded, said a spokesman of the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs.
More than 176,000 people have been affected by the cyclone and the flooding in Mozambique, including more than 8,300 people who have been displaced. 32 accommodation centers for the displaced have been opened in the heavily affected Sofala province, including in Beira city. As humanitarian partners, we're already responding to multiple needs in Mozambique, including to the conflict in Cabo Delgado in the north and the recent impact of tropical storm Cyclone. More resources are urgently needed to ensure that we can scale up quickly to respond to the needs from tropical cyclone Eloise.
The World Health Organization on Tuesday accused the wealthy nations of vaccine nationalism and urged them to ensure coronavirus vaccines are also made widely available for poorer countries.
As we speak, rich countries are rolling out vaccines, while the world's least developed countries watch and wait. With every day that passes, the divide grows larger between the world's haves and have-nots. In my opening remarks last Monday, I said the world faced a catastrophic moral failure if it doesn't walk the talk on vaccine equity. Vaccine nationalism might serve short-term political goals, but it's in every nation's own interest to support vaccine equity. I leave you with a challenge I set at the beginning of the week. Together, we must ensure that vaccination of health workers and older people is underway in all countries within the first 100 days of this year.
And moving on to China now, CGTN reporter brings us information on the health situation regarding COVID-19 in Hebei province in the People's Republic of China. Let's have a look.
Well, about 3 weeks ago, on January 2nd, the first patient of COVID-19 was found in the city of Shijiazhuang, and 4 days later, the city issued restrictions for all citizens on travel and gatherings. And there are 11 million people in the city, and the public transport is still suspended by today. And also in the meantime, there have been 3 rounds of mass testing for all residents of nucleic acid test. And the number of people that found infected with the virus during the test has dropped from over 300 in the first round to 32 in the third. And the daily new added cases is also dropping from nearly 100 a week ago now to a dozen by Friday. And all patients are now being treated in hospitals. 3 main hospitals in the city have been set up to treat these patients, including those asymptomatic carriers. And there are some of the best doctors in China are helping them. In the meantime, a temporary quarantine center is now being constructed in the city, Well, this place will be used to quarantine those close contacts with confirmed cases. And some 1,600 wards were delivered by Friday, and in total there are 4,000 wards and will be delivered soon. And also in the meantime, the city has ramped up restriction measures in Gaocheng district, where this outbreak starts. And city authority also issued special permits to companies delivering essential goods and supplies to the city for people isolating at home. And essential workers like medical staff and police officers are allowed to leave their community, but they need to be tested every 48 hours. And of course, the result must be negative.
We thank teleSUR's collaborator Nin Hong for that report. Moving on, Mauritius on Tuesday began vaccinating against COVID-19, a crucial step for the Indian Ocean archipelago nation as it seeks to revive its hard-hit tourism industry and welcome visitors again. An on-duty doctor at Victoria Hospital in the central town of Quatre Bornes was the first to receive the jab, with about 100 other medical staff expected to be vaccinated on Tuesday. Health Minister Kailash Jaguptal said the campaign would initially target frontline healthcare staff treating patients with COVID-19 and workers meeting passengers at the airport. The first 100,000 doses of vaccines were donated by India. At a ceremony on Friday, India's High Commissioner to Mauritius, Nandini Singla, handed over the vaccines to Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jugnauth. Mauritius, with a population of 1.3 million, has officially recorded 568 cases and 10 deaths since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Indonesia has confirmed coronavirus infections since the pandemic began crossed 1 million on Tuesday, and hospitals in some hard-hit areas are currently near capacity. Indonesia's health ministry announced that the new daily infection toll rose by over 13,000 on Tuesday. The country is the most affected in Southeast Asia. To date, it registers more than 28,000 deaths. The milestone comes just weeks after Indonesia launched a massive campaign to inoculate 2/3 of the country's population, with President Joko Widodo receiving the first shot of a Chinese-made vaccine. Healthcare workers, military police, teachers, and other at-risk populations are being prioritized for the vaccine in the world's fourth most populous country. Tunisians protested outside their heavily guarded parliament on Tuesday as lawmakers voted on a new government. The protest comes after a week of youth protests and riots over poverty and lack of jobs that left one young demonstrator dead and hundreds jailed. Prime Minister Hichem Mechichi announced a government reshuffle last week in the midst of the unrest. He promised on Tuesday that the new team would concentrate on deep reforms to create jobs and improve living conditions in the North African country, which has been mired in an economic crisis deepened by the coronavirus pandemic. More than 24 human rights groups and other groups called for a march on Tuesday afternoon through central Tunis to demand the release of hundreds of people arrested in this month's unrest and to denounce repressive measures by police. And lastly, a team of 10 Nepalese climbers who became the first to scale the world's second highest peak during the harsh winter season received a hero's welcome upon returning home in Nepal on Tuesday. Mountaineers, supporters, friends, and family lined at the Kathmandu airport to greet the climbers with garlands and cheers as a police band played tunes. The winter climb marks another achievement for Nepalese climbers who for decades worked as porters and as guides for foreign mountaineers, but now are setting their own records and running expeditions on the highest peaks. K2 is the most prominent peak of the Pakistani side of the Himalayan range and is second in height only to Mount Everest.
It has to be justice for every team members. Also, in the world, there is so much going on with the pandemic, with the global warming and everything. We wanted to show the world a very clear message that if we unite, we can make the impossible possible, and everybody did the same thing. And I think it's a very good message for the rest of the world.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For TeleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.